Welcome everybody to Timbinor Beling in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Venerable Robina Courtin is joining us from New York, and she's been ordained since the late 1970s. Venerable Robina has worked full-time since then for Lama Thipten Yeshe and Lama Zopa Rinpoche's FPMT. Over the years, she has served as the editorial director of Wisdom Publications, editor of Mandala Magazine, executive director of the Liberation Prison Project, and as a touring teacher of Buddhism. Her life and work with prisoners has been featured in the documentary films Chasing Buddha and The Key to Freedom. So welcome, Venerable.
Good, darling. Thank you for having me. Thank you so much. And hello, everybody. Hello, happy to see you. I know. Suddenly I'm in New York City. It's very odd. 3 minutes around the corner from where I lived when I was whenever, it doesn't matter, but 40 million years ago. It's very strange. Anyway, here I am, and I'm happy to be here. Happy. Hello, people. Who's there? Hello, Susie. Hello, Adam. Adam's there. Hello, where's Adam? I saw Adam before. Adam's gone. What happened to him? There he is. Hello, Adam. Your beard's getting longer. You're getting more Mr. Fu Manchu by the day. Less on the top and more on the chin, looks like. Okay, so darling people, be your own therapist, as Lama Yeshe famously said, and it's such a great way to put it. You know, being a Buddhist, really. And so we just think, here we're going to be for 1 little hour, 60 little minutes. We're going to have a few thoughts coming out the mouth. We're going to discuss the basic approach to being a Buddhist, you know, and why we're going to do that, so we can develop these tools to help ourselves completely develop our own amazing potential. This is really the fundamental point that Buddha is making, which is already so encouraging, you know, that we've got this marvelous potential, that we're not set in stone, that we can mold our minds into any shape we like, as Lama Zopa says, another great saying, for our sake, but because we live in this crazy planet together for the sake of others as well, you know. So that's why we're here for this little hour. I think like that. And we listen freshly as if we never heard it before. And I try to say it as if I've never heard it before. Then it comes meaningful, you know. So what I think is surprising to us, because when we think of religion, we think of spiritual. When we think of religion, sort of religion, and here's religious, you know, I'm a nun and I've got the Buddha behind me. It sounds like religion, right? Then, of course, we think of holy and we think of ritual and we think of that. But we would never think of it being your own therapist. That sounds very surprising to us. That sounds very modern, very kind of Western, as if we somehow invented psychology, you know, Mr. Freud 100 years ago or whatever. But as long as the Dalai Lama points out to us very humbly and kindly, it was these amazing Indians, I always quote this, more than 3,000 years ago. They were the ones who began the investigation into the nature of self. This is really quite serious. It's quite shocking to hear that. Because, I mean, we're a bit arrogant, you know. We people who track ourselves back to the Europeans, we're a bit arrogant. We probably think we're the beginning and the end of all culture. And we know nothing about China and nothing about, India, not to mention nothing about Australian Aboriginal view of the universe, which has been around for 40,000 years or whatever. And so somehow it's kind of these days, especially too, more and more because of the Dalai Lama's presence, and more of the stuff being published, it's now becoming evident to the thinkers and scholars and scientists that actually there's extraordinary knowledge already existing well before we thought there was, you know. And I think it's very excellent to know this, very amazing. And the thing I think we don't realize, if we're Buddhists, we think, I mean, I like to remind us, but it's these Indians, they're the ones. I mean, Buddha came out of that tradition. He was educated in this incredible tradition, astonishing tradition, that where these people they're the ones, these Indian yogis, invented this ability to access these subtle levels of mind. They're the ones who began the investigation. What is the self? Who are we? What is this kind of thing, you know? I mean, there are these views all over the world. There are views all over the world, and it's marvelous. So Buddha came out of that, and then he went as far as he could go in that tradition. Then he kind of diverged in his own direction. And it's particularly in relation to his own direct experiential findings about the nature of self. And that's exactly where he diverged, you know. This is where then so-called Buddhism then came alive, you know, since 2,500 years or whatever. And so the Buddha's essential point about the self, you know, this word self has a big deal in Indian. It's the word Atman. And the equivalent really in Christianity is the word soul. But in Buddhism, there's no equivalent. I mean, the word self is fine. We don't use that in Christianity. We say soul, as if there's a second, as like a third component. You've got the body, you got your body, you got your mind, which does the thinking, and then you got your soul, or your spirit, people call it. Well, Buddha doesn't distinguish. He says precisely two things: the mind and the body. But what's important, if we want to understand what Buddha's saying, is that the mind is got more the character, it's got all the characteristics of the way we think of the mind, like thinking and analysis and intelligence and conceptual thoughts and emotions. That's all mind for Buddha. But also what you'd think of as maybe spirit or soul, speaking very loosely. There are these more subtle levels of our consciousness that these Indians discovered, not by reading books and looking into the moon, but by looking inside, by really being their own therapists. And that's where this brilliant technique that the world vaguely knows as mindfulness, it stems from it, but it's called single-pointed concentration. Samadhi is this incredibly subtle state of mind that we do not posit. It's very simple. As much as we're geniuses in the modern world with scientific views, we don't posit such a level of mind, It's a much subtler level. And there's nothing mysterious about it. It's all there. It's there, but we don't access it. We live at the very gross level, So let's look at the gross level and let's look at some of the Buddhist ways of seeing how we cognize things and how we get into trouble. Because basically Buddha's saying the certain stuff in our minds that gets us into trouble. They're the unhappy states of mind: attachment and anger and fears and jealousy and depression, And the key characteristic of these states of mind is that they're not accurate. They're not accurate. It doesn't mean it's not accurate to have them. We have them, but the function of mind in Buddhism, as much as when we say emotion, we sort of really what we mean is those feelings called anger and jealousy, or even lovely ones like love and compassion. It's a very strong feeling we're talking about, and it's usually when the body is very involved, when your body's shaking, or when your body is inert in bed and you can't get up because you've got depression. They're the troubled ones for us, but that we link them very much to the body. And the key thing about that is that we leave it till too late to look at them. And this is why the body's involved. The body's very gross, at a grosser level of our being. Our mind is more subtle. And these states of mind, the unhappy ones, they have the emotional ones, the unhappy emotional ones, they have a particular characteristic of being very disturbing. I mean, check the last time you were anxious, jealous, depressed. It was horrible, very simple. But there's other characteristic, which is what really is when we can begin to recognize this. This is when we really become a Buddhist. This is Buddha's very unique approach to the why these states of mind causes so much pain and suffering. It's not evident initially. We're going to look into it. So this particular characteristic it's indicated by this word, which is another word for these unhappy emotions. One word that we know they call them in Indian language and Tibetan language afflictions. Sounds very kind of a bit old-fashioned for us. We don't use it. These mental afflictions, these painful states. But there's a particular characteristic they have. And this is why we suffer because of this. And this is indicated by the word delusion. Now, in some languages, it's a bit old-fashioned word. Like afflictions is old-fashioned for us. Like in Spanish or Italian, the word is very weird, so I don't use it, or in French as well. But so the word in delusion in English is really excellent. It's right down Buddha's alley, I tell you. And the words are easy enough to understand, but it takes us time to identify this quality of our unhappy emotions and this word delusion, meaning very well if you are accused of being delusional, someone is telling you you're not in touch with reality. Now, I say this a million times, but it's so utterly true. That's exactly, precisely what Buddha is saying. Not only when you're angry, depressed, jealous, low self-esteem, arrogant, you name it, not only are you disturbed, are you unhappy, but you are literally delusional, meaning that when that anger is overriding your mind, when that jealousy is running the show, when that depression is completely prevailing, it's like you got your jealousy glasses on, your angry glasses on, your attached glasses on. So when you got those glasses on, everything, and the way using Lama Zopa's words, everything out there appears back to us. They talk about the mind being like a mirror. Don't make it fantasy. It's very interesting. That everything out there appears back to us in the aspect of whatever glasses you've got on. I mean, we say it when you've got your rose-colored spectacles on. Everything looks hunky-dory and lovely and gorgeous. Well, that's the attachment glasses. But now we know when you got your angry glasses on, everything looks ugly. The person looks ugly. The event looks ugly. The politician looks ugly. We kind of know that, but we don't join the dots. And the thing is, this is what Buddha's saying. This is the essence of the reason we suffer. Because first they make us miserable having them, and then because they cause the event or the person to not appear to us accurately. And that's the part that's hard to see. So when, if Adam punches me in the nose, and then Buddha's saying to me, well, Robina, your anger is over exaggerating Adam's badness, I'll say, well, what are you talking about, Buddha? He did punch me in the nose. Well, Buddha's not arguing. He did punch me in the nose. You saw it. That's proof. That's okay. He did cheat on me. You can say that. But what Buddha's saying is the anger, still, it is a fact that he did that. But because of the way these delusions work, the anger over exaggerates his badness, paints the whole of Adam with the one brush of ugly. Now we know that. Now look when the opposite, look when I was in love with Adam and I discovered he wasn't, and I didn't know he was cheating on me, and I thought he was heavenly. Then Adam is being seen, he appears back to me through the lenses of my attachment glasses, which means he appears totally divine. And these delusions are delusional insofar as they don't give you an accurate picture of the person. This is very kind of almost like clinical, but if we really analyze it, it's hard to see it because I'm as mad as hell at Adam, and I feel I'm allowed to be angry with him because look what he did to me. But the fact is the anger is exaggerating. Adam is more than just that, but we don't like to see it. When we're full of that anger or that hurt or that jealousy or that depression, when you're depressed, you can't see past your own nose. The whole world, including yourself, appears absolutely terrible. And it's hard, this is the point, it's hard to believe that that's not the whole story, that it's not, that it's hard to believe that there's another way of seeing things. I mean, His Holiness Dalai Lama one time was asked how you apply this concept of emptiness into daily life, which sounds so complex. He said it's very simple. You simply learn to see things from another point of view. This is what's difficult. When you're caught up in anger, 17 people can tell you that, Robina, it's not the whole story, but you don't want to believe it. When we're caught up in the thrall of these emotions, we know this. They're very concrete. They're very fixed. They're very absolute, We know that. And we don't want to hear any alternative. When I'm in love with Adam and someone, his ex-wife tells me he's a creep and you better be careful, Robina, he cheats on people, I'll think she's ridiculous. He's not going to cheat on me. No way. He's perfect. We know we do this. We hear these words and we do recognize it. But when we're in the midst of these emotions, it's very hard to see it. It's very, very hard. And this is the essence, really, of applying Buddhist psychology in daily life. But it sounds easy, but it's the hardest job we'll ever do, because what happens is we constantly focus. When I'm thinking about, you say to me, Mary says, Robina, well, tell me about your anger. Talk to me. She's my friend. And what I'll do is give a detailed description of ugly Adam. She'll say, well, that's fine, you're describing Adam, but what about talking about your anger? And I won't know the difference. So we get very obsessed with the object. If I'm totally attached to chocolate cake, and Mary says, describe your attachment for me, I won't describe my attachment. I will describe the chocolate cake that my attachment is seeing. So we are fixated on the external. So the key job the Buddha is really getting us to do, which is quite extraordinary, is to look at the state of mind itself and listen to the cognitive, listen to the actual, listen to the conceptual story that underpins that feeling called attachment. That we call it feeling, don't we? The emotion, when it's very intense and your heart is beating and the body is involved, it feels so physical. It feels so more than merely a conception. But what it is, anger, jealousy, depression, they are a build-up of the concepts that are these exaggerated concepts of the object, a build-up from countless lifetimes, not mentioned countless days in this life, of having them. They build up, they become emotional, and then we completely buy into their story. This is the essence of the Buddhist approach to life, I tell you. And that what we learn to do as we're learning to, mold our mind into any shape we like, as Lama Zopa puts it, because the mind is very flexible, and that's very encouraging. Because the tragic, or when we're trying to be our own therapist and unpack and unravel our mind, and this is the part that's difficult for us in the West, because we're so fixated on, well, I'm angry because my mother did this, and I'm jealous because my father did that, and I'm this because he did that and she did this. We're always looking at the external, fixated on the external. Yes, Adam cheated on me. Yes, this, that. But that's not the issue for the Buddha. You're trying to look at the mind itself. So the words sound easy enough, but as Honest Dalai Lama said, to really know your mind, to really see the mind itself, because it's not physical, is quite intense, quite difficult, quite subtle, you know. But that's our job. And why should we want to look at the mind and not the event? I mean, I look at the event. I need to see what Adam did, fact. But I need to see the way, because basically they're interpretations. And a really good way to look at this is very sobering. When you study the Buddhist model of the mind, and we've talked about this, you study what they call the epistemological model of the mind, which is the way the mind functions. And it's very sophisticated, fascinating, utterly fascinating in Buddhist psychology. I tell you, it's amazing. But there's one key point that's really very sobering. And I've talked about this often enough. The way that we've got in the epistemological model, we've got the sensory consciousness, and we have mental consciousness. And this is very, very telling. So basically, if I can look at handsome Adam, or that, always use the example of my thermos, right? I'll say, oh, that's a nicely designed thermos. I always use that example because I think it's a nicely designed thermos. That's why I bought it on the internet, you know? So then basically what we think, and this is a really important point, what we think is that my eyes are seeing a nicely designed thermos. Well, technically, no, they're not. It's my senses. I've got to spell it out very carefully. We've got sensory consciousness. Consciousness and mind, they're used synonymously. So your mind is not physical. This is fundamental for the Buddha. That's a whole other discussion. But basically, eye consciousness, ear consciousness, tongue consciousness. We know the five senses. So spelling it out, eye consciousness is that part of my mind working nicely with the eyeball. That's not the eye consciousness, that's physical. And the nerves and the eyelid being open and the light being on and the shape being there. My eye consciousness, in combination with the other pieces, has a cognition of precisely two things. The senses are profoundly limited in their capacity for cognition, okay? This is a really important point to understand. Eye consciousness can only cognize two things precisely: shape and color. And it doesn't even know the words for them, but just bare bones, shape and color. Now, this is the point that's very sobering. So if my eye consciousness is not cognizing, because the job of your mind is to cognize something, and the mind always has an object. Every part of your mind cognizes something. So your eye consciousness cognizing shape and color, if that's all it can cognize, you have to ask the question, what part of my mind is cognizing a nicely designed thermos, or not to mention a handsome Adam, you know? It's a really powerful point. You've got to ask the question, well, what part of my mind is doing that cognizing? Well, this is it. This is the mind. This is the mental consciousness. You've got sensory and you have mental. And as Lama Zopa says, the mental consciousness, that's where the workshop is. That's where all the thoughts and feelings and emotions and unconscious and subconscious and instinct and intuition, all the intellect, that's where everything happens. The senses actually are like dumb animals with respect to dumb animals, you know. They're profoundly limited. But look how we give them so much power. We determine our happiness and suffering in terms of how our body feels. We make the body the boss, as Lama Yeshe says, and it's a complete distorted, exaggerated nonsense, you know. So eye consciousness mainly cognizes shape and color. And this is what happens, because everything we think and do and say, this is the interesting point for the Buddha, stays in the mind. Nothing goes astray. And this is since beginningless time, as outrageous as that sounds. Whatever we've ever seen, heard, tasted, touched, smelt, thought about is imprinted in the mind, not just as a karmic imprint, that's one thing, but as simply as a memory. Everything's planted in our mind as a memory. It's all in there. And that's why eventually we can access it and have so-called clairvoyance, because it's all there to be known. So basically, even in just this life, forget about past lives, I've built up certain taste, opinions, ideas, viewpoints, and basically your conceptual mind, mental consciousness. You've got sensory and you have mental. Okay. Now, within the mental, you've got two levels. You've got the grosser level that we live in day to day, which is called conceptuality. It's a grosser level of our cognition. And then, of course, when we've got single-pointed concentration using this genius technique these Indians invented, and you get shamatha, that's when you access a subtler level of mind, and eventually you start to get realizations. That's when they refer to the way your mind is functioning as perception. It's a non-conceptual, direct way to cognize. It's very abstract. We don't think like this in the way we talk. It's a very specific definition. So we live at the grosser level, the tip of the iceberg. We live at the level of conceptuality. And that includes concepts. 1 + 1 is 2. That is a nice thermos. It includes, I hate Adam. He's the cause of all my suffering. It includes all the emotions, because you know what? They're all thoughts, concepts, viewpoints. Some have an emotional component because they're strong in us, and that's why the body's involved, but they're all basically concepts. Anger is a concept. That is a nice thermos is a concept. 1 + 1 is 2 is a concept. So these conceptual stories, when Buddha talks in Buddhism about in the psychological model, you divide those into valid concepts and nonsense up the creek without a paddle concepts, or the deluded concepts, or the angry concepts, the jealous ones. So they're emotions, yes, but they're underpinned by being a conceptual story. So what happens is, when my eyes go to this thing here, this shape and color, then quicker than Google, up comes my mental consciousness is accessed. That's where the workshop is. And up comes this story. That is a nicely designed thermos. Adam is so divine. He did this, she did that. And we spend our lives with these conceptual stories. And of course, we do not ever doubt any one of them. This is the interesting point. This is where this is stuck in samsara. Bad enough, as Lama Zopa says, that my angry glasses are on, and I hate that politician out there. Bad enough that politician, forget Adam, will appear back to me wrongly because it's appearing through the lenses of my anger. But the tragedy, the worst part is, I don't even think it's a viewpoint. I think it's the truth. And that's how we get stuck in samsara. We live our lives like this. We never question a single thing that we think. Because it arises in my mind, it is the truth. And this is how we're stuck in samsara, Buddha says. So the most powerful practice is to be your own therapist, to unpack and unravel, and to begin to distinguish in this mind of ours, as we've talked often enough, between these deluded, distorted, painful, emotional, mental afflictions, very real, and the valid states of mind, like love, intelligence, kindness, compassion, forgiveness, generosity, that are in their nature more reasonable. They are also concepts, but they're reasonable concepts. And this is the division in Buddhist psychology. This is a crucial one. And this is not how we talk in modern psychology, negative and positive, virtuous and non-virtuous. It sounds very judgmental, but this is the essence of the Buddha's view. But the first point is to realize that, quicker than Google, and this is true, up comes my opinion. Oh, that's a well-designed thermos. And I don't think it's an opinion. That's why we'll fight. Adam says, well, no, Robina, it's a really ugly thermos, and we'll have a fight because he's got one view and I've got another view. He thinks he's right. I think I'm right. Why do you think we have fights? Because we're disagreeing with the concepts. We all got different opinions. We've all got different glasses on. So to even, as Pavan Rinpoche says, even just to doubt that just maybe things don't exist in the way I absolutely believe, that's like atomic bombs onto the delusions. This is the essence of being a Buddhist. So the first one is we have to notice the opinion. And of course, if it's a big habit, it just comes exploding out the mouth. How dare you do that to me? I don't deserve it, blah, blah, blah. I mean, look at the suffering, look at the world, So this is why being your own therapist is not a joke. It's a deadly serious job, and the hardest job we'll ever do, because it's reversing. It's like reversing the energy of a bomb, I tell you, to begin to look at what's going on in our mind. It's so intense, Not looking at what Adam did. Yeah, he might have done that. That's his business. Now let's look what my mind is doing. And that's the part that's hard. And part of it, why it's hard also, is because I know I'm angry. Of course I'm angry, Robina. Of course I'm angry, Mary. What do you think? Look what he did to me. I'm allowed to be angry, we'll say. So we don't even want to look at the anger because we justify it. We defend our right. Ego does that. Ego wants to defend its right to be jealous, angry, depressed, and all the rest. And that's not being mean. That's how we are, And then we think it's true. There's some truth there. He did punch me in the nose. He did cheat on me. That's a truth. But what we don't realize is there's a distinction. This is really powerful. Let's say this is now very powerful if you think of the world. Let's say you think about there's a war in one country. We hear there's a war in Ukraine, okay? So let's say, depending on your view, whether you're Russian or Ukrainian, depending, isn't it? You have a view about that war. And this is a really powerful point. So you have a view about the war. There's some of these conceptual states of mind are simple facts, So there is a war in Ukraine. You can prove it to be a fact. You can check it up. People will tell you, you read the news, and you can prove that's a factual concept. But what happens is we then have an opinion about it. And then we, depending on our view, we get angry or we defend, But what we don't realize is one is a fact, and then you add a story on top. So when we think of giving up anger, oh, you mean there's no war in Ukraine? Oh, you mean Adam didn't punch me? That's not what's being said. We just chucked the baby out with the bathwater then. There is a war in Ukraine, but we add an opinion onto it. We add an emotion onto it. And it's the same with a pain in the knee. Don't be fancy. You have a pain in the knee and then you're angry. Well, of course I'm angry. I've got a pain in my knee, we'll say. What do you mean? It's got nothing to do with a pain in the knee. A pain in the knee is one thing. Being angry is another. When we can start to realize that that is what's happening, then we can learn to change our opinions, change our responses, look more precisely at the conceptual stories that are interpreting the knee, interpreting Ukraine, interpreting Adam. This is the job of being a Buddhist. And it's not an easy job because we don't want to do it. We'd rather just believe our own stories, This is why it demands some kind of practice. It demands habit, developing a practice, doing our purification practice, which makes it easier. And this is the day-to-day job of daily life, noticing what the hell your mind is thinking, and not just defending it. And this is a hard job because it's so, even in Western psychology, they talk about 1,000 thoughts a second, So to really be aware of your mind second by second is pretty advanced, I tell you. But all we can do is start. All we can do is try. This is the essence of being a Buddhist, I tell you. It's the essence of it. So now it's time to ask me questions. Okay, you people, we have 30 minutes left. Now ask me questions. Or tell me what's going on, who's cheated on whom, whose daughter is not behaving, whose parent is making them crazy. Come on, people, talk to me. What's going on? Lorna, anything for you? You're okay, Lorna? All good? Okay. Anything? Who's got a question? Barbara, what about you? There's Barbara. You got a question, honey?
I'm interested in anxiety from a Buddhist psychology perspective.
Good. Tell me, why don't you, I think many of us have these words, but we might have a different experience. So why don't you tell me, and describe anxiety to me? It's a really good question.
It's just an energy that seems to exist in me.
An energy. But what is
it?
Describe it. What describe it? Is it?
Yeah, it's
call it worried about things.
Yes, worried, like fearful.
Okay.
Thinking of disasters and feeling my heart rate increase. And
oh my God! So you worry about your family. You worry about what's happening in the world. You worry about whether you're sick and going to die. I don't want to be too personal, but we've all got variations on the same theme, haven't we? So tell me about. You worry about what might happen, or what did happen, or what?
This sounds self-cherishing, but I always think people think I'm wrong. Like I always think I come back to this idea that like I'm saying this to you right now and I'm wondering what you think of me. It's constant dialogue I have.
Barbara, you are just describing every human being's mind. We're all like that. We're so conflicted and so ridiculous. And this is that's one particular one. That's really describing. That particular one is this deeply instinctive attachment in us. We've got attachment to sex, drugs, and rock and roll, but the deepest attachment, and you just expressed it, honey, is this constant yearning, wish to be seen nicely. So then that brings the fear of not being seen nicely, the worrying about what people think about you. You talk too loudly in the restaurant and your sister says, be quiet, they're thinking, they're watching you. This is really the deepest one in all of us, darling. It's very, very deep, this one. And that's all. You see, anxiety also is linked to attachment. Attachment, it sounds such a simple word, but it's really multifaceted and it goes to very deep levels. So in other words, one way of talking about anxiety is that we're never satisfied minute by minute with what's there. We're never satisfied, you know. We're always feeling something's missing or something's wrong or something might happen or something might go wrong. Like you want an ice cream, or what if the traffic doesn't? What if the traffic's too busy? And what if they don't have the right ice cream? What if they're closed? And then worrying about what people think. And because we haven't paid attention to our minds, you know, we really don't with respect to us until it's shouting. We don't even notice what our thoughts are doing until they're shouting. We know that. Then that's why it's just we spend our life, you know, just raving on. The mind is uncontrolled. So when we start to notice it, and in a way, you know, also obviously from your question, your words, Barbara, and you use the word self-cherishing, which means you're looking at the Dharma, you're already noticing your mind. You are noticing. And what the irony of that is, it's often we think we're getting worse. But honey, you're seeing your mind. So you've got to be brave because you are seeing it. And the anxiety is there. Everyone's got it until you're highly advanced. Anxiety and worries are just part of how the mind is. Then it expresses itself as anger or annoyance or frustration. And it might express itself as then jealousy, depending on your personality. All variations of these. They're all just these unhappy thoughts, and they're all related. They're all set. The main player is I, isn't it? It's always I, isn't it? That's how it is. But this is just Buddha's description of samsara, Barbara. And what you're doing is you're experiencing it. So be happy that you're seeing it. It's sort of like you've been eating the wrong food for 35 years, and now you're suddenly seeing how unhealthy you are. Well, you're shocked by it. But at least you're seeing it now, and you can start to change it. So part of the process is we need this courage to see the mind, like you're describing. But one of the key things is, and this is hard, is not to believe it's permanent, not to believe this is me, and then I say I'm bad, which is our tendency to be guilty. We've got to have the courage to see the problem, know it's not set in stone, and then if you like the Buddhist techniques, you just slowly, because it is a very slow process of practicing every day. So it needs the courage of noticing it and living with it as you're a work, because you're a work in progress. You can't, like, if you just suddenly decide to go and lose 50-pound weight, you don't come home from the gym looking perfect on the first day. And you've got to live with that 50 pounds, and then you live with the 49 pounds, and then you live with the 25 pounds, but also you're being enthusiastic, even though you've still got too much weight, because you're now doing the work, Barbara. And that gives you courage. That I can't stress enough. It's not as if you'll only be happy when you've lost 50 pounds. You're miserable until then. No, you've got to start being happy that you're losing the weight. So you've got to start being happy that you're working on your mind. That has to be cultivated. So be happy, Barbara, that you see your mind and you're working on it. You're doing your best. What do you think?
I think that's really insightful and validating, because I thought I didn't think you would understand how that feels, because you seem so
Bossy,
centered
confident,
and put together and confident. And
well, honey child, we're all in the same boat, you know. This is
so
why I
feel
talk about
better.
this stuff, because I'm in the middle of it myself too, and trying to have some confidence with this approach, you know. So, darling, please, it's so important, this one.
So you made me feel better, and I took a few notes, and I will come back to that. So thank you so much, Venerable.
And you keep going, Barbara, and you don't give up, okay, Petal?
Thank you.
All right, darling. Thank you, Barbara. So, yes, Mary.
Oliver has a question, and then there's a question in chat.
Good, Oliver. Talk to me, darling.
I was wondering, how do we balance this concept of being one's own therapist for those of us who are also seeing a Western psychologist undergoing therapy for mental health issues?
Absolutely. I think, you know, in a sense, when you already go to a therapist and you've got a good person who's helping you, you are already doing that job. You're already doing it, because that person is a sounding board for you. Would you agree with that? They're merely a sounding board. And if you've got the right person, you can trust them. You know that they want you to be healthy, and that you can trust that person to open your heart, and that you go home after that and you do the work. So you're doing it already. We need every help we can, including an external therapist if that's necessary. But in the end, you have to do the work. You understand my point? You have to do it. So you are doing it already. You're just using another person to give you advice. That's all. Do you understand my point, Oliver? Does that make sense?
Yeah, certainly. I think my therapist has said something similar, that you have to do the work yourself.
That's right.
Guide you along.
If not, they're just you think they're going to save your life, and they won't. You'll still be going 47 years later, still being miserable. So they're there to be, and we need that in our culture, because we're not used to. In our culture, we don't have techniques of learning to see our mind since we're children. We just develop this skill of therapy, you know, and that's fine. I mean, if you can have anybody you can talk to, whom you can trust, whom you can have some feel secure with, to delve into your heart, this is marvelous, Oliver. Go for it.
Thank you.
All right, good. What's the question on the thing, Mary?
It's from Karen. She's having some tech difficulties, so I'm going to ask on her behalf.
Okay.
If our primordial nature is that of clear light, how do obscurations arise in the first place?
Okay, that's a very good question, and it assumes the assumptions in your question are mistaken, Karen. Let me describe what that means. So this is a really good point. The Buddha's saying that our potential is for the mind to be totally unencumbered by delusions and to be perfected in goodness. And that's really what Buddha means. Buddha implies the eradication of all delusions, and Da implies the development to perfection of all goodness. So when not just your clear light mind, but when you've accomplished that, that's our true nature. So that doesn't mean that you were that once and then you lost it. It doesn't mean that at all. Not at all. Not in the slightest. In other words, they always talk about Buddha nature. We've all got Buddha nature. Well, I always think of an acorn. If you look at an acorn and you learn, well, mummy, what's an acorn? She will tell you, and using this language purposely, well, sweetheart, that's a potential oak tree. You put it in the ground and you give it nourishment and you give it a bit of time, and eventually it'll turn into an oak tree. Look, like that one over there. And you'll get a big surprise. This little tiny thing turning into that marvelous thing. But you learn that's what it means. So you could argue that the true nature of an acorn, what defines an acorn, is its potential to be an oak tree. That's exactly what it means, that your mind, the clear light nature of your mind, is your true nature, that the mind being perfected is your true nature. It doesn't mean you were it before and then you lost it. It means as long as your mind exists, it possesses naturally this potential to be free of all the delusions, because they're adventitious and fully developed in the goodness. That's the meaning, sweetheart, and that should give us courage. As long as there's an acorn, it always is defined by its potential to be an oak tree. In fact, that's what an acorn is by definition. So that's what a mind is by definition, a potential Buddha. That's what it means. I hope that helps.
Karen said that makes perfect sense. Thank you so much.
Very happy. That's good, darling. What else is there? Come on, people. Questions, please. No other questions. Okay, well, let's talk more about this one, because I think our biggest trouble, we know this, because these delusions exaggerate, that's their function, they exaggerate the badness. Well, the irony of ego is that we know, like Barbara's talking, and what we were mentioning, the I is the central player in all this, you know. Our thoughts never stop. They're chatting away. And then, you know, and I've never yet met a person who says, Robina, I can't stop thinking good thoughts. When our mind is uncontrolled, we usually mean it's the negative thoughts, you know. Otherwise, if it's just lovely thoughts, we're happy with it. So, and the irony of that is they're the voices of ego. They're never satisfied. They're always limited. They're distorted. They're not representing reality properly. But the tragedy is because they come so spontaneously, because that anger arises so easily when Adam did that action, that I totally believe it, like I said, I totally believe it to be true. So, but if we look at them in relation to ourselves, then it's exactly the same. I'm depressed, I'm hopeless, I'm no good, I'm this, I'm that, I'm bad, I'm limited. We always believe it to be true, and it's very hard not to believe it. So if you're really miserable in yourself, and 17 people can tell you you're a nice person, can point out your good qualities, you're hungry to hear it, but you don't believe a word of it. This is the utter tragedy. We know this. And so we get so fed up with our mum, let's say, is always like someone just recently was telling me about their mother, you know, old, always threatening suicide, nobody loves me. We know people like that. And we know it's so infuriating. We try to argue with them, but they just don't believe it. So this is the irony of ego, that we're addicted to misery. This is the irony of ego. We're addicted to misery. Our ego is not about love and compassion. That's the opposite. They're spacious, reasonable, confident states of mind. So the job is to see, like I said to Barbara, to really have confidence that these delusions are there, hear them, taste them, listen to their stories, but they don't define our nature. They don't define us. They don't define us. They're there, they're real, they cause pain, but they're not set in stone. This is Buddha's fundamental finding. It's really, and it's dealt with an enormous depth in the literature, how they're not set in stone. They're not our true nature. This is so important. First of all, to hear it, and then slowly to attempt to have confidence in it, It's very powerful. It takes time because we somehow run to the negative ones. I mean, 17 people can tell you good things about yourself. You want to hear it, but somehow you just don't believe it. But one person says a bad thing and you believe it instantly. We all know this one. This proves the point that we but we're addicted to believing the bad ones. So ironic, so ironic. That's what ego means. So then, like I said to Barbara, though, this is the way Buddha's analysis. So we've got to see this. But then, of course, the first thing is we think we're getting worse because we're noticing it. It's sort of like you've never noticed your health. Let's say you've never thought of health. You've never thought of nutrition. And suddenly you start learning about nutrition. You're shocked by how bad your body is. You're shocked by how overweight you are. You're shocked about how your knees hurt and the kidneys this and the liver that. You didn't even notice before. And you're not getting worse. You're just noticing it. They even say this in the texts. Pabonka Rinpoche talks about when you learn this technique called single-pointed concentration, this marvelous technique invented by these Indians 3,000 years ago, concentration meditation. As Pabonka Rinpoche says, it's described in terms of 9 stages of cultivation of this concentration. And he says, a sign of success at the first of the 9 is you think you're getting worse because you're noticing your thoughts. You're not getting worse. So that's why I said to Barbara, you need courage because we don't want to know about the negative thoughts. We wish they'd all go away. That's why we think meditation just makes them all go away. It's ridiculous. It doesn't. We've got to be courageous and listen to those thoughts and listen to their story and then analyze how they're not a valid assessment of reality. This really demands a lot of hard work because we just rather drown in these unhappy emotions and believe their story. This is the tragedy, So it's hard work. It really is hard work. Do the work is absolutely a good saying, I tell you. It's really intense looking at our minds. But it's the most worthwhile job we'll ever do. And as Lama Zopa says, we can mold our mind into any shape we like. This is a wonderful idea. And it's got to give us courage, What else, people? Come on, ask me some questions, please.
Venerable, I have a question.
Good, Carrie. It's not
Susan.
Carrie. Who is it?
Susan.
Where's Susan? I have to find you first. There you go, darling. I can see you. Yes, good.
Why do we have an ego that is addicted to misery? I mean, why did we end up this way? Why? We have a clear mind potential, yet we have this thing working against it.
I know, Suzanne. It seems such a simple question, isn't it? And there's a very simple answer. It's almost too embarrassing. The answer is so simple, it's embarrassing. It's sort of like you're asking, why am I so bad at playing the piano? Well, it's because you haven't practiced enough. You might as well ask, why am I good at playing the piano? Because you've practiced. So if at the moment in time we look at our mind and we can see the anger or the depression or the jealousy, then that's only because we've practiced them. And this is the point of the Buddha, the big one to think about. You don't get them from your mummy and daddy. They're not just random. You bring them with you. This is the whole idea of reincarnation, which might be an idea you like or don't like, I don't know. But that's very much the Buddha's view. We come fully programmed with our own tendencies, And so we already come into this life not like an empty vessel. We're already programmed with a bunch of habits. So it's because whatever habit prevails is the habit you've practiced most. But then because it's a habit, we know we can change it. That's the action point from it. Does that help, Suzanne? This makes no sense.
It helps a little bit, yeah.
I know, because the point is asking why. That's the answer. It's because you practice it. When there's no big capital W why am I so lousy at piano? It's simply because you haven't practiced it enough. But whereas what happened, and I think part of this is the point, Suzanne, what we tend to do is, I'm hopeless at piano. We over exaggerate the difficulty of being good at piano, and I'm a hopeless piano player. Oh, I'm no good at piano. Oh my God, why am I no good at piano? And then you get set in stone. But if you just recognize, okay, I'm not very good at piano. I must have practiced non-piano for ages, but now I can change. That's the real point. I can change because they're not, these delusions aren't set in stone, Suzanne. But honey child, you know, the other thing is this is the irony of ego. Here we are in this class talking about how to change our minds. This is not a gun club. This is not a club of how to kill people or steal or lie. We're not out there kind of, you know, so actually what we're doing is the fact that you even came to this class is the fact that you're looking into your mind and you want to become, you're trying to mold yourself into a more marvelous person. You're trying to become the Suzanne you want to be. This is incredible. We should be all weeping with happiness at the fact that we even want to become a better person and that we're trying hard to do it, Suzanne. Many people on the planet, not being rude, have no interest in doing this. So we should be praising ourselves as well. We should be highlighting our potential, not just looking at our bad habits. That's a very major point, actually, to lift us up. You with me?
Yes, yes, thank you.
Really important, darling. We've got to point out our good qualities as well. We really forget that. Otherwise, we get very, very distorted view of ourselves and we drag ourselves down. We've got to have the courage to see our potential and our good qualities and praise yourself for your effort. I can't stress that enough, Suzanne. That lifts us, you know.
Yeah, that helps a lot. Thank you.
Yes, it's important, Suzanne. Thank you. Yes, Carrie.
Hello, Venerable Robina.
Oh, sweetheart.
Thank you for your teachings.
Good.
I'm working on my anger response.
Uh-huh.
Sometimes something happens, my anger comes up quickly.
Yep.
And I'm pretty good at noticing, oh,
Okay.
this has angered me.
Okay.
But I'm in a room with someone and they're looking at me and they've said something.
Uh-huh.
I'm going, oh, anger, okay.
Okay.
Anger, yeah. And it sort of takes some time for me to process through and think
Okay.
about, well, what would be a response I could say in this moment?
Okay. Okay. So then,
Because I don't want to respond with aggression, but I also don't want to say, oh, yeah, that's great. You know, hit me on the other side.
no, exactly. No, darling. Okay. I understand exactly. So, okay, first of all, it's obvious. It depends on the scenario. So this is if it's your son, then you have one type of response. You know, you must respond immediately, you know, to the son, if it's your child. If it's your husband and it's an old habit, it depends. If it's this person in the street, it's another scenario. But the general approach, the general view in Buddhism, the very kind of classical levels of practice, the very first level, entry level, junior school, grade 1, is you have to learn first to have control over the servants of the anger, and what that is, the fist and the voice. So at least you don't say the words. So this is the point. But this itself takes so much practice. At least don't say the angry words. Maybe your mind is boiling, but at least you don't say the negative words. You don't have to say a positive word either. I mean, I know it's not easy when you're in the midst of a relationship and there's, you know, dramas they're the ones we have the stuff with. It's so powerful. This really takes practice to at least don't say the words. I mean, is that feasible? Or is it an intense discussion you're having, or what in this context?
I think it's always feasible to not say any words. It's just like I don't punch someone in the face.
Yeah, well, exactly. This, you see, I think.
But then there's the long pause.
I know. Well, I mean, but is this a discussion with the closest person in your life? Is it just a random friend? I mean, you got to look at the context. I'm not trying to be too personal.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think anyone can make me angry, you know, but I think that if my mom says something, you know, it might be a lot of anger comes up.
Sure.
And I might want to I might go a little blank in terms of how I might respond.
I understand. But like you said, you know, like as if when you said the other one, just be passive and let the person hit me with the other fist. I mean, then if it's a person really being aggressive and angry with you and really harming you, that's another discussion again, you know. It's all, I mean, there's so many scenarios you can imagine. The worst, most mild.
The scenario of saying, okay, stop. Don't treat me that way.
Is this person harming you? The scenario you're discussing here is a very specific one, is it? A person really
no hitting, no harming.
No, but being unkind.
It's like a mean word or Yeah, unkind.
Okay. Okay. So people do that, don't we? We do that, don't we? We are unkind sometimes. So if if all a question too of your capability, of your level of practice, if you've never tried it before, then it's very hard just to sit there and say nothing. At least, I mean, so it's a level of practice. So if it's a close friend, a really good practice is just to say nothing and ignore it. Of course it's painful, because I mean, I'm not trying to make it complicated, but it depends on the person, the scenario, the event, the time. There's so many things. But the key general approach to internal practice is learn first to control our body and speech. At least don't do the harm, because we know, especially with family, once the words are out the mouth, it's just too late. Then you have to do all the healing, So at least don't say the words. Even if you're looking a bit weird by not saying anything, let them think what they like. It's their problem. But at least don't do the harm. I mean, but on another scenario, if it's your sister and you've got a certain kind of relationship, it might be appropriate. Depends on your personality. It might be appropriate to say, listen, honey, I'm sick of this. I mean, it sometimes depends on the personality. If you've never normally said anything, maybe it is good for you to say something. It depends on you. But if you're typically angry and vomit out the words, it's a really good practice just to zip the lip, Do you understand?
I do.
And
Thank you.
then you can get, they always say, there's a nice saying, when you're with others, you watch your body and speech, you watch your behavior, you really pay attention to how you appear and to what you're saying and doing. And when you're on your own, that's when you work on your mind. That's like your real practice internally. But when you're with others, at least don't do the harm. And I mean, look at families, look at the suffering of families, because we're uncontrolled with our mouths, We mightn't go around killing and stealing from each other, but the mouth does the most terrible harm. So to really watch that around family especially is incredibly beneficial practice. Do you understand? Really?
Yeah.
And you'll be glad, you'll be happy that you didn't say it.
Yeah.
Because, once it's said, the damage is hard to heal. Do you understand, Karen?
I do. Yeah.
But
Thank
you've got
you.
to make a decision. Like, like when I said on one of the last week on Thursday, whatever class it was, where I was Thanksgiving for Americans. So you're going to be at that thing. Who's going to be there. The trouble areas. You just got to make a powerful decision beforehand. I'm going to watch my speech like a hawk, and just kind of feel back away and let people do and say what they like, instead of diving in and making a mess, Really very powerful, especially around family. Yes, Carrie, you understand? Makes sense?
Thank you.
Good going. Thank you so much. Yes, Mary.
Karen has another question.
Good.
She says, I know this is a beginner question, but what is the I that becomes enlightened or reincarnates? What is the mind?
Okay, so the I, first of all, is not the mind. So the I or me or person or self is the name given to a type of phenomenon like you or me. An animal is an I, a person with a mind possessor. We are a person, we are a self, we are an I. That's the name. That's a thermos, This is a computer. That's a hand. Everything that exists has a label, a name. This is an I. So it's just a name given to a mind possessor. Think of it simply. So when you die, the Buddhist has a very clear view of this. The body disappears. The gross body stops, and the subtle level of your physical energy, this is how they talk, goes with your mind, a subtle level of mind, and it goes to another life, depending on the karma you create. So the mind reincarnates, and you become a new I with another name. Speaking simply, it's like that. All right, Karen, how does that sound? Good enough?
She said, thank you so much.
Okay, it's a pleasure. Well, look, suddenly an hour has gone like a dream. It's pretty shocking, isn't it? Look, 25 minutes have gone. That's amazing. Always amazes me. Be dead soon, all of us. We've got to get ourselves together. So more 5 minutes. So why don't we just watch our minds? So we'll do a few minutes meditation, okay? From Lama Yeshe's lovely Mahamudra teachings. Seemingly very simple technique, but very lovely. And it's a beginning of an advanced technique. We'll just watch our minds for a few minutes. So just close your eyes, be very natural, sit up straight, don't slump into your chair because you'll fall asleep. Sit up straight just for a couple of minutes, okay? Feel it's very natural. And we're just going to simply, it's like concentration meditation. Normally we would meditate, we'd concentrate on our breath. We're not going to concentrate on our breath. We're going to concentrate on our mind. And all that means is whatever thoughts pop up. So instead of being in the middle of the thoughts, drowning in the thoughts, arguing with them, listening to them, having opinions about them, back off, just back off and let the thoughts come and let the thoughts go. And you just pay attention like you're watching. Just have part of you watching. You're paying attention to the thoughts and mind your own business and let them come and go. Okay? That's the job for about 3 minutes. Watch your thoughts. Just pay attention to the thoughts. Just let them come and go. Stay alert. Just watch. No opinions. So that's it, people. So then you bring this skill to bear in your daily life. And you learn not just to pay attention to the outside world, but you start to pay attention to the inside world as well, and learn slowly, slowly to hear the thoughts that underpin your emotions. And this is the key thing. Slowly we learn to grab the thoughts before they become emotional, before they vomit out the mouth. Okay, that's the skill to learn. That's really being your own therapist, slowly, slowly. And then that's it. Okay, people. Thank you, darlings. That's it. Anything that's been useful, even 1% of it, then try to practice. And then rejoice in your efforts. Like I said to, both people, both of you. Who was it now? I can't remember. Delight, Suzanne and Barbara. See your delusions, be glad you're seeing them, but know they're not permanent, and see your good qualities. This will lift you. I can't describe the necessity of this enough. Next time. See you next Sunday, darlings. All right. Jangchub Semchog Rinpoche, Ma Ke Panam Ke Guchig, Ke Panyampa Me Payang Gong Ne Gong Du Hava Shog. May compassion grow and grow in the hearts of all. Thank you, sweethearts. So kind. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.